Dr. David Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, every Kiwi family knows that setting budgets is about making choices. And for most Kiwis, it's a pretty simple task. We want pretty straightforward things. We want a good job. We want a home that we can call our own. We want a good school to send our kids to. And we want healthcare if we get sick. It's not rocket science, Mr. Speaker, but this government, unfortunately, has lost its way. People in the middle cannot rely on this government to support their priorities. They're increasingly arrogant and out of touch, and we've seen it with the Panama Papers, where they have looked to defend the interests of the ultra-wealthy, where they've looked to defend the interests of those who are speculators from abroad. Their instinct has not been to stand up for middle New Zealand. They have let down their guard, and New Zealanders see that their priorities are different to ours. This government is too focused on those at the top. They are now only sticking up for the super rich, and in the meantime, for middle New Zealand, the Kiwi dream is slipping away. This week, some research has brought to light the fact that economic development under this government has not shared the gains that have been made. There has been very little of it. But what little there has been shared unfairly too. Under the last Labor government, 50% of the gains from the economy, more than 50% of the gains, went to working people. Today, that proportion has slipped to just 37%, Mr. Speaker. Again, we see where the priorities lie for this government, and they are not with the people in the middle in New Zealand. They are for those who are ultra-wealthy and who are speculating from offshore. Under National, that Kiwi dream is slipping away. And we can see it in so many areas. Not only where the housing market has become a plaything for speculators, locking a generation of Kiwis out of home ownership, but also in the health sector. $1.7 billion cut from the health budget over 6 years from independent analysis. An education system that is burdening our young people with debt. An education system that offers only debt and no promise of home ownership and involvement in society. Labor, of course, has a plan for that. Our 3 years of free education or training scheme, which would see middle New Zealand have the opportunity to get ahead. And of course we know that kind of common sense would pay itself off quickly. We know that a nurse, for example, who goes back and trains would pay 16 times the value of those course fees over the course of a lifetime in taxes and so on through increased earnings. We know that kind of situation makes sense, but this government is not acting in the interests of middle New Zealand. They are too busy defending the interests of the mega rich. So, Mr. Speaker, when we see this happening, when we see the housing crisis, where New Zealand has the lowest home ownership rates in 65 years, where we see that house prices have shot up 90% since 2008, we ask, what is the government going to do about it? And tomorrow is the big day. We'll see whether they have a plan to stop New Zealanders living in cars and garages, whether they have a plan to tackle the housing crisis, whether they can even say the words crisis. Because we know it's getting worse. We know it's getting worse. GDP growth per person in the last year has been zero. The only thing that has funded growth in New Zealand's economy is immigration. That is the only thing that is pushing up our income figures as a country. On a per person basis, as one Westpac economist describes it, the economy is sluggish. We have 40,000 more Kiwis out of work than when this government took office in the midst of the global financial crisis. 40,000 more. We have 26,000 more kids out of employment, education and training. 26,000 kids, the workforce of tomorrow. This government has no plan. And they have no idea. They're out of touch with middle New Zealand. We put down the challenge to them tomorrow to deliver on it, but I fear we will not see the solutions that middle New Zealand deserves to see.
Good speech. Barbara Kurigan.